The research station floated in the darkness of space like a small metal moon. Inside its white corridors, scientists from dozens of different alien species worked on their various projects. Some studied strange plants from distant worlds, others examined rocks that glowed with mysterious energy. But in the deepest part of the station, behind the thickest walls and strongest force fields, something truly dangerous lived. The Drakmorian hatchling had arrived 3 weeks ago, sealed inside a container made of the hardest metal known to the galaxy. 20 armed guards had escorted it to the maximum security containment cell. The xenobiology team had watched through protective screens as the egg cracked open, revealing a small creature covered in sharp black scales. Its eyes glowed like burning amber and tiny horns poked from its skull. Even as a newborn no bigger than a large dog, it radiated menace. Dr. Velnax, the lead xenobiologist, kept his 6 eyes fixed on the security monitors. His insectoid body clicked nervously as he watched the hatchling pace inside its cell. "We must maintain emotional distance," he reminded his team for the 100th time. Drakmorians feed on fear. They bond to beings who project dominance through terror. If anyone shows weakness, the creature will attempt to establish a psychic link. The other researchers nodded. They had all studied the reports. Drakmorians were the galaxy's most feared predators. Adult specimens grew to the size of small spaceships. Their scales could withstand weapons that melted through battle armor. Their psychic abilities could crush mines from orbit. Entire colonies had been evacuated when Drakmorians entered a system. Peace had never been achieved with their kind. This hatchling represented a rare opportunity to study them. But everyone knew the danger. Emma Chen did not know any of this. The 7-year-old girl hummed a song as she skipped down the corridor, following the path her father had taken. Dad worked as the chief maintenance engineer on the station, and Emma often accompanied him during the boring adult meetings. Today, while he fixed a broken door panel in the restricted section, Emma had wandered off to explore. The station was her home. She had lived here for 2 years. Ever since Mom got promoted to managing the human delegation, Emma knew most of the corridors and had made friends with many of the alien workers. The Vrelnathi traders always gave her sweet crystallized fruits. The Thaxian security guards taught her words in their clicking language. The Krell engineers let her watch them work on the big machines. But this corridor was new. Emma had never been allowed past the big door marked with red symbols. Today, though, the door stood open while her father worked on its control panel. She peeked through and saw another hallway that curved out of sight. Her curiosity pulled her forward. The walls here looked different, thicker. The lights were brighter and there were strange devices mounted every few meters. Emma touched one and it beeped at her. She giggled and kept walking. At the end of the hall, she found a window that looked into a large room. Inside the room, something moved. Emma pressed her face against the thick glass, her breath fogging the surface. At first, she couldn't quite make out what she was seeing. Then the creature stepped into the light and Emma's eyes went wide. "Wow," she whispered. The hatchling turned toward the window. Its glowing eyes locked onto the small human face. Psychic tendrils extended from its mind, probing for fear to feed upon, for dominance to submit to. This was how Drakmorians bonded. They found the strongest, most terrifying being and imprinted on them as the ultimate alpha. What the hatchling found instead made it freeze. Pure wonder. Absolute delight. Not a trace of fear. And underneath it all, something the hatchling had never encountered in its brief life. Genuine affection. "You're so cute," Emma squealed, pressing both hands against the glass. The hatchling tilted its head. Its psychic probe, extended to latch onto terror, instead touched this strange, warm emotion. It felt like sunlight, if sunlight could be a feeling. The creature took a hesitant step toward the window. Emma bounced on her toes. "Look at your little horns. And your shiny scales. You're like a baby dragon from my storybooks." In the observation room next door, alarms began shrieking. Dr. Velnax burst through the door, his mandibles spread in alarm. "No, get away from the containment window." His translator device made his voice sound panicked and mechanical at the same time. But it was too late. The bond snapped into place like a lock clicking shut. The hatchling and the girl stared at each other, and something fundamental changed in the universe. A psychic connection formed, invisible but unbreakable, tying 2 minds together across the barrier of glass and force field. Emma didn't understand what had happened. She only knew that she suddenly felt very connected to the cute creature on the other side of the window. She could sense its confusion, its loneliness, and underneath that, a desperate hunger for companionship. "Are you lonely?" Emma asked softly. "I'm sorry. Being locked up must be scary." The hatchling made a sound no one had ever heard a Drakmorian make. It was soft and rumbling, almost like the purr of a cat, if that cat weighed 300 pounds and had armored scales. Dr. Velnax reached Emma and gently pulled her away from the window. His hands shook. "Child, do you understand what you've done?" Emma looked up at him with innocent brown eyes. "I just said hello." She seemed sad. "She?" Dr. Velnax's translator couldn't quite capture the horror in his voice. "Yeah." Emma pointed at the hatchling, which was now pressed against its side of the window, eyes still locked on the girl. "She's a girl dragon. I can tell." More researchers rushed into the room. They checked scanners and monitors, their faces showing various expressions of shock and fear depending on their species. A Krell scientist's tentacles writhed in distress. A Thaxian guard's crest stood straight up in alarm. "The psychic readings confirm it," someone said. "Full imprint bond. Complete connection." "This is unprecedented," another voice added. Dr. Velnax knelt down to Emma's level, all 6 eyes focused on her face. "Little human, I need you to listen carefully. That creature in there is a Drakmorian. They are the most dangerous predators in the known galaxy, and you have just bonded with it. Do you understand?" Emma looked at the hatchling, who stared back with those glowing amber eyes. She felt the connection between them, like a warm thread stretching from her heart to the dragon's. It didn't feel dangerous. It felt right. "She won't hurt me," Emma said with the absolute certainty that only children possess. "She's my friend now." "That's not how Drakmorians work," Dr. Velnax tried to explain. "They don't have friends. They have prey and rivals and—" "Emma!" Her father's voice echoed down the corridor. "Emma, where are you?" When her father arrived and saw where his daughter stood, his face went pale. When the researchers explained what had happened, he had to sit down. When Emma asked if she could visit her new friend again tomorrow, he couldn't find words to respond. Within an hour, emergency messages were being transmitted across the galaxy. The research station went into lockdown. Security protocols tripled around the containment cell. And in offices on 100 different worlds, government officials began making very worried calls to each other. A human child had bonded with a Drakmorian hatchling. The galaxy would never be quite the same. The emergency council meeting began exactly 48 hours after the bond formed. Representatives from 37 different species gathered in a massive virtual conference chamber. Their holographic forms flickered around a circular table that didn't physically exist anywhere, yet connected minds across thousands of light years. Ambassador Sarah Okonkwo represented humanity. She was a tall woman with dark skin and gray-streaked hair pulled back in a tight bun. She had negotiated humanity's entry into galactic society 5 years ago. She had handled first contact protocols with 16 different species. She had mediated trade disputes and cultural misunderstandings, but she had never seen the council chamber filled with this much fear. "This situation is unacceptable," declared High Counselor Threx of the Thaxian Empire. His reptilian features were set in a permanent scowl, his red scales gleaming under the lights of his homeworld. "A Drakmorian hatchling has formed an imprint bond with a child, a human child who has no psychic abilities, no understanding of the danger, and no means to control what that creature will become." Ambassador Okonkwo remained calm. "The bond formed naturally. My people did not seek this outcome." "Naturally?" Dr. Velnax's hologram flickered with agitation. "Nothing about this is natural. Drakmorians imprint on the most fearsome being they encounter. They bond through terror and dominance. How did a 7-year-old human child trigger an imprint response? Perhaps," offered council member Xyloth of the Krell Collective, their aquatic form floating in a tank of blue liquid. "That is precisely the problem." The child showed no fear. Drakmorians have evolved to read psychic signatures. They interpret absence of fear as ultimate dominance. The hatchling may believe this small human is the most powerful being in existence. Murmurs rippled through the council chamber. Some representatives made sounds of distress in their native languages. "Then the solution is clear," said Matriarch Vess of the Vrelnati Hive. Her insectoid body was perfectly still as she spoke, but her psychic presence radiated cold logic. "We must terminate both the human child and the hatchling before the bond strengthens further." "Absolutely not." Ambassador Okonkwo's voice cut through the chamber like a blade. Humanity does not execute children. For any reason. It is not execution, Matriarch Vess insisted. It is prevention. In 10 years, that hatchling will be large enough to crack open starships. In 20 years, it will be able to destroy cities with its mind. In 50 years, it will be functionally immortal and more powerful than most planetary defense systems. And it will be psychically bonded to a human who cannot possibly understand how to control it. You're asking us to kill a little girl? Ambassador Okonkwo said quietly. The answer is no. High Counselor Threx leaned forward. Then what is your alternative, Ambassador? Shall we wait until the creature grows and inevitably goes on a rampage? Shall we count the bodies after it happens and say, well, at least we were compassionate to one child? I propose we study the bond, Ambassador Okonkwo said. This is an unprecedented situation. The Drakmorian hatchling has not shown aggression toward the child. In fact, reports indicate it becomes calm in her presence. Of course it does, Dr. Velnax interjected. The hatchling believes the child is its alpha. But what happens when the child cannot provide adequate leadership? What happens when the hatchling faces a threat and the child cannot respond with sufficient dominance? The creature will break the bond violently and everyone nearby will die. Or, Ambassador Okonkwo countered, what happens if we're wrong about how Drakmorians work? Humanity has a long history of forming bonds with creatures other species considered untamable. We domesticated wolves into dogs. We befriended wild horses. We kept cats which were independent predators in our homes. We even formed partnerships with birds of prey. Those were simple animals, Matriarch Vess said dismissively. Drakmorians are intelligent, psychic, and have wiped out entire civilizations. They are not pets. I'm not suggesting we treat the hatchling as a pet, Ambassador Okonkwo replied. I'm suggesting that humanity's approach to predators is fundamentally different from yours. We don't see danger. We see potential for connection. And perhaps that's exactly what this situation needs. The council erupted in overlapping arguments. Some species demanded immediate action. Others called for more research. The Thaxian Empire offered to take custody of both child and hatchling, claiming their warrior culture could provide proper containment. The Krell Collective proposed separating the pair and seeing if the bond would weaken over time. Ambassador Okonkwo waited for the noise to die down. Then she played her final card. I would like the council to hear from Emma Chen herself. Silence fell across the chamber. The child? High Counselor Threx sounded incredulous. What could a 7-year-old possibly contribute to this discussion? More than you might think, Ambassador Okonkwo said. She gestured, and a new hologram appeared in the center of the council chamber. Emma sat cross-legged on the floor of a small room. She wore a blue shirt with a cartoon spaceship on it, and her black hair was pulled into 2 ponytails. And sitting beside her, scaled head resting on Emma's lap, was the Drakmorian hatchling. Half the council members recoiled. Security alerts pinged across multiple systems. Several representatives demanded to know why the child was in direct contact with the creature. Emma looked around at all the alien faces with wide, curious eyes. Hi, she said, waving. My name is Emma. Child, Matriarch Vess said carefully, do you understand why we are having this meeting? You're scared of Ember, Emma said, gently petting the hatchling's head. The creature's eyes were half closed in contentment. Ember? Dr. Velnax asked. That's her name, Emma explained. I named her yesterday. She likes it. The hatchling communicated this to you? Councilmember Xyloth leaned forward with interest. Not with words, Emma said, but I can feel what she's feeling. And she can feel what I'm feeling. When I'm happy, she's happy. When she was scared, I was sad for her. The bond functions both ways, Dr. Velnax muttered, making notes. Fascinating. High Counselor Threx was less impressed. Little human, that creature is extremely dangerous. It could kill you without even trying. Emma looked down at Ember, who gazed back up at her with adoring eyes. No, she couldn't. She would never hurt me. She loves me. Drakmorians don't love, Matriarch Vess stated flatly. They dominate or they destroy. There is no other mode of existence for them. Maybe nobody ever taught them differently, Emma said. Her voice was soft but certain. Ember was all alone when I found her. Everyone was scared of her, so nobody was being nice. That made her scared too. She just needed someone to be her friend. Ambassador Okonkwo spoke up. The hatchling was exhibiting aggressive behavior toward all staff members before the bond formed. After Emma's first visit, those behaviors ceased. The creature now responds to verbal commands and shows clear attachment behavior. Attachment to one human child. High Counselor Threx argued. What about the rest of the galaxy? Emma spoke again, her words simple but powerful. My dad says we should treat others how we want to be treated. Everyone was treating Ember like a monster, so she acted like a monster. But I treated her like a friend. And now she's my friend. Maybe if more people were nice to Drakmorians, they'd be nice back. The council chamber fell silent. The logic was childish, simplistic, based on naive optimism rather than hard experience, and yet none of them could deny what they were seeing. The most dangerous predator species in the galaxy was purring in a little girl's lap. Council member Xyloth's tentacles swayed thoughtfully. Perhaps we are approaching this from the wrong perspective. We have studied Drakmorians as threats. We have never attempted to study them as beings capable of social bonding through nonviolent means. Because they have never demonstrated such capacity, Matriarch Vess insisted. They have now, Ambassador Okonkwo said. After hours of debate, the council reached a compromise. Emma and Ember would remain on the research station under constant supervision. Every interaction would be monitored and recorded. The human delegation would be held responsible for any aggressive behavior from the hatchling. And if at any point in the next 6 months, the situation became dangerous, the termination order would be executed immediately. It wasn't the outcome anyone preferred, but it was the best they could achieve. As the holograms faded and the council members disconnected, Ambassador Okonkwo looked at Emma's transmission one last time. The little girl was reading a picture book to the hatchling, who listened with rapt attention. The galaxy had 6 months to decide if a child's love could change the nature of a monster. Ambassador Okonkwo intended to prove that it could. 3 months passed on the research station, and life settled into a new normal. Emma visited Ember every day after her lessons. The containment cell had been modified, expanded, and filled with things a growing Drakmorian might need. And grow Ember certainly did. The hatchling that had once been the size of a large dog now stood as tall as a horse. Her black scales had become thicker, more lustrous. Her horns had grown into elegant curves that swept back from her skull. Her wings, which had been tiny nubs, now stretched wide enough that she had to fold them carefully to move through doorways. And her tail, tipped with sharp spikes, could sweep across the entire width of her enclosure. Dr. Velnax watched through the observation window as Emma threw a titanium ball across the containment cell. Ember bounded after it with enthusiasm that seemed wrong for a creature of her species. She caught the ball in her jaws, careful not to puncture it, and trotted back to drop it at Emma's feet. Again, Emma laughed, picking up the ball. The behavioral changes are remarkable, Dr. Velnax said to his assistant, a young Krell named Plix. Drakmorians are solitary ambush predators. They don't play, they don't fetch, they certainly don't show excitement over social games. Plix's tentacles curled thoughtfully. Yet this one does. Should we alert the council? We've been alerting the council daily, Dr. Velnax replied. Some members want to see threat in everything the hatchling does. Others are becoming more accepting. Ambassador Okonkwo argues that we're witnessing domestication in real time. Inside the containment cell, Emma had climbed onto Ember's back. The dragon lay down carefully, allowing the child to sit comfortably between her wings. Emma opened a book and began reading aloud. Today we're reading about the ocean, Emma announced. It's this big water place on Earth where fish live. Look, there's pictures. Ember craned her neck to see the images. Her glowing eyes tracked the illustrations of whales and dolphins. Through their bond, she could feel Emma's love for these creatures, her wonder at their size and grace. Do you think we could visit Earth someday? Emma asked, scratching behind Ember's horn ridge. I could show you the beach. We could watch the waves together. Ember made her rumbling purr sound. It vibrated through Emma's whole body, making the girl giggle. I'll take that as a yes, Emma said. Dr. Velnax made more notes on his datapad. Linguistic comprehension is advancing rapidly. The hatchling clearly understands human speech now. Yesterday I observed her following a 3-step command from the child. Sit, turn around, show your wings. Through the psychic bond? Flix asked. No, through actual language processing. The bond allows emotional communication, but the hatchling is learning verbal communication independently. This suggests higher cognitive function than we previously attributed to their species. Over the following weeks, the research team documented more surprising behaviors. Ember demonstrated problem-solving skills when Emma created puzzle boxes that required pushing buttons in sequence to release treats. The dragon figured out the patterns within a few tries and even remembered the solutions days later. Ember also showed remarkable emotional intelligence. When Emma arrived one day with red eyes from crying, the dragon became immediately attentive. She nuzzled the girl gently and made soft, comforting sounds. Emma hugged Ember's neck and explained that her pet goldfish from Earth had died. "I miss Mr. Bubbles," Emma sniffled. "He was my friend for 2 whole years." Ember wrapped one wing around Emma protectively. Through their bond, she sent feelings of comfort and understanding. Even though Ember had never seen a goldfish and couldn't comprehend what 2 years meant to a human lifespan, she understood grief. She understood her bonded human was in pain, and she responded with compassion. Dr. Velnax watched this interaction with fascination. "Empathy," he whispered. "She's displaying genuine empathy. This contradicts everything we know about Drakmorian psychology." But not everyone on the station shared the research team's growing optimism. Security Chief Mordax, a scarred Thaxian warrior with 30 years of military experience, watched the dragon with constant suspicion. He had fought in border wars and faced down pirates. He had seen good people die because they underestimated threats. "That creature is getting stronger every day," he told Dr. Velnax during a security briefing. "Her psychic presence is expanding. Soon she'll be powerful enough to influence minds beyond her containment cell." "She shows no interest in doing so," Dr. Velnax replied. "Yet," Security Chief Mordax growled. "She shows no interest yet. But what happens when she reaches adolescence? Drakmorian teenagers become unstable, aggressive, territorial. Their psychic abilities surge unpredictably, and this one will be bonded to a human child who can't possibly provide the dominance needed to control those urges. Emma has controlled her perfectly so far. Through love and games," Security Chief Mordax said dismissively. "What happens when real challenges arise? What happens in a crisis?" The answer to that question came sooner than anyone expected. It started with an alarm in a different section of the station. A containment breach in the xenobiology labs. A helix serpent brought in for study 3 weeks ago had escaped its enclosure. These creatures were highly dangerous, 30 feet of coiled muscle and venom-dripping fangs. They could move through ventilation systems and attacked anything that generated heat. Security teams mobilized immediately. The station went into lockdown protocols. Automated announcements told everyone to shelter in place. Emma was in the education center when the alarm sounded. She was with 5 other human children and their teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez. The door sealed automatically, keeping them safe inside, but the helix serpent was already in the ventilation shaft above them. Ember was 3 corridors away in her containment cell when she felt Emma's fear spike through their bond. The dragon's head snapped up. Her eyes blazed brighter. She sensed danger near her bonded human, and every instinct screamed at her to respond. The containment cell was designed to hold a fully grown Drakmorian. It had walls reinforced with composite metals. It had force fields that could stop plasma weapons. It had security measures that 30 species had contributed to designing. None of it mattered. Ember slammed into the force field with the full weight of her growing body. Alarms shrieked. The field held for 3 seconds, then collapsed under the sustained assault. Ember tore through the first security door, her claws ripping through metal like paper. The second door lasted slightly longer. The third door she simply smashed aside. Security Chief Mordax heard the breach alarms and his blood ran cold. The Drakmorian was loose. This was the nightmare scenario. He grabbed his weapon and ran toward the containment section, already knowing he was too late to stop whatever was about to happen. But Ember wasn't rampaging. She was running with absolute focus toward Emma's location. Her psychic senses followed the bond like a beacon. She could feel Emma's terror as the helix serpent dropped from the ceiling vent into the education center. She could feel the other children screaming. Ember burst through the education center's sealed door with a roar that shook the walls. Inside, the helix serpent had reared up, ready to strike at the clustered children. The serpent was ancient and feared by most species in this sector of space. It took one look at the enraged Drakmorian and knew it had made a fatal mistake. The fight lasted less than 10 seconds. Ember moved with speed and precision that shocked the security teams watching through cameras. She didn't flail or destroy randomly. She positioned herself between the serpent and the children, then struck with surgical accuracy. One bite to the serpent's neck, severing its spine. One sweep of her tail, knocking the thrashing body away from the children. When Security Chief Mordax arrived with his team, weapons raised, he found Ember standing protectively over Emma and the other children. The dragon's body was tense, ready to fight anyone who came closer. But she hadn't harmed any of the humans. She had carefully avoided damaging the room beyond what was necessary to defeat the serpent. And she was looking directly at Emma, who had tears streaming down her face. "It's okay, Ember," Emma said shakily. "You saved us. You're a good girl." The dragon's aggressive stance melted. She lowered her head to Emma's level, and the girl wrapped her arms around Ember's snout. Dr. Velnax arrived moments later, out of breath and terrified. He assessed the scene. Dead Helix serpent, frightened but unharmed children, and a Dracmorian displaying perfect control despite obvious battle readiness. "This changes everything," Dr. Velnax said quietly. Security Chief Mordax lowered his weapon slowly. He had been ready to terminate the dragon on sight. He had been certain this breakout meant disaster, but watching the creature comfort the crying child, watching it ignore the other humans who posed no threat, he had to admit what he was seeing: control, purpose, protection without collateral damage. "Perhaps," Security Chief Mordax admitted grudgingly, "the human approach has merit after all." The warship appeared at the edge of the system without warning. It was massive, shaped like a predator frozen mid-strike, all sharp angles and weapon ports. Its hull was made of the same black scales that covered Ember's body, each one larger than a transport shuttle. And it radiated psychic pressure so intense that sensitive species on the research station immediately felt ill. Alarms blared across every station system. Security Chief Mordax rushed to the command center, where Ambassador Okonkwo was already studying the tactical displays. "Identification?" she asked calmly, though her knuckles were white as she gripped the console. "It's Dracmorian," the sensor operator said, her voice shaking. "An adult warship. We're receiving a transmission." On screen, the view screen shimmered and 3 figures appeared. They were enormous, each one filling the frame. Their scales gleamed like polished obsidian. Their eyes glowed with power that had witnessed centuries, and their presence, even through a view screen, made everyone in the command center want to flee. The central figure spoke. His voice was deep and ancient, translated by the station's computer into words humans could understand. "I am Scorvath the Render, elder of the Dracmorian Empire. We have detected an anomaly in our species' psychic network, a hatchling with an incorrect imprint pattern. We have come to investigate and correct this aberration." Ambassador Okonkwo stepped forward. "I am Ambassador Sarah Okonkwo, representing humanity. The hatchling you detect is under our protection and has committed no crime." Scorvath's eyes narrowed. "Humans. Yes, we were informed of your involvement. You have interfered with natural Dracmorian development. The hatchling must be examined and, if necessary, re-imprinted correctly." "She's not an aberration," Ambassador Okonkwo said firmly. "She simply bonded differently than you expect." "There is only one form of Dracmorian bonding," Scorvath replied. "Through strength and dominance. To imprint on weakness is corruption. It must be purged. I request that you meet the hatchling and her bonded human before making any decisions." Ambassador Okonkwo said, "See the situation firsthand." The 3 Dracmorian elders consulted silently, their psychic communication invisible to the humans. Finally, Scorvath spoke again. "We will board your station, prepare docking procedures, and have the corrupted hatchling ready for inspection." The next 2 hours were controlled chaos. The station prepared for the arrival of 3 adult Dracmorians. Special docking clamps were extended, cargo bays were cleared, and security teams positioned themselves everywhere, though everyone knew that if the elders decided to attack, nothing would stop them. Emma was in Ember's containment cell when her father came to explain what was happening. Emma sat on Ember's back, braiding colorful ribbons into the spaces between the dragon's horns. Ember seemed to enjoy the decoration, purring contentedly. "Emma, sweetie, we need to talk," her father said gently. Emma looked up. "Is something wrong? Do you remember how we talked about Ember's family? How there are other Dracmorians out in space?" Emma nodded. "Are they coming to visit?" "Yes. 3 very old, very powerful Dracmorians are coming to see Ember. They're worried about her because she's different from other dragons. Emma frowned. Different isn't bad. We know that, her father said. But they might not understand. They might try to take Ember away or change how she thinks. I need you to be very brave, okay? Emma hugged Ember's neck protectively. They can't take her. She's my friend. Through their bond, Ember felt Emma's distress. The dragon's head swung around, eyes brightening with protective instinct. A low growl rumbled in her chest. Easy, girl, Emma whispered, scratching behind Ember's horns. It's okay. We'll face them together. When Scorvath and his companions boarded the station, the psychic pressure was overwhelming. Crew members with any psionic sensitivity collapsed. Even those without such abilities felt a weight pressing on their minds, like standing at the bottom of an ocean. The three elders moved through the corridors like walking mountains, their scaled forms barely fitting through passages designed for much smaller beings. They were escorted to Ember's containment area by Ambassador Okonkwo and Dr. Velnax. Security teams followed at a distance, weapons ready but knowing they were useless. Scorvath stood before the observation window and gazed at the young Drakmorian inside. Ember had grown significantly, but compared to Scorvath, she was still just a child. The elder's psychic presence extended into the containment cell, probing, examining. Ember felt the intrusion and growled. She positioned herself between Emma and the window, wings spread protectively. Interesting, Scorvath said. The hatchling recognizes my superiority but refuses to submit. She prioritizes protecting the small creature behind her. His ancient eyes studied Emma, who peeked around Ember's wing. That is the human child? Her name is Emma, Ambassador Okonkwo said. She's 7 years old. A juvenile, Scorvath said dismissively. Weak, powerless, with no psychic abilities whatsoever. How did such a being trigger an imprint response? Perhaps you should ask her yourself, Ambassador Okonkwo suggested. The door to the containment cell opened. Emma walked out, and Ember followed close behind her. The young dragon's eyes never left the three elders, her body tense and ready. The psychic pressure in the room intensified. Scorvath and his companions exerted their dominance, expecting the hatchling to submit. Ember should have collapsed under that pressure, forced to acknowledge her elder's superiority. Instead, Ember growled louder and moved closer to Emma. Stop it. Emma's voice cut through the tension. You're scaring her. Three ancient beings who had destroyed moons and crushed armies turned their attention to this tiny human. Their psychic presence focused on her like spotlights. It was pressure that had made admirals weep and warriors kneel. Emma Chen crossed her arms and glared at them. You're being mean, she said, her voice trembling slightly but determined. Ember is good and nice, and you're being bullies.
Stop it right now.
Scorvath tilted his massive head. The psychic assault that would have shattered most minds simply bounced off this child, not because she was strong, but because she literally couldn't feel it. Humans, with their lack of psychic sensitivity, were immune to the Drakmorian's primary weapon. Fascinating, Scorvath murmured. He shifted his approach, probing deeper into the bond between hatchling and child. What he found there made him pause. There was no dominance hierarchy, no fear-based submission, no territorial claim. Instead, he felt something completely alien to Drakmorian experience. Unconditional positive regard, genuine affection, love given freely without expectation of return. The human cared for the hatchling not because Ember was powerful or useful, but simply because the child had decided to care. And Ember had responded to that care with loyalty and devotion that ran deeper than any imprint Scorvath had ever witnessed. This is impossible, said one of Scorvath's companions, a female elder named Vice. Drakmorians do not form such bonds. Yet she has, Scorvath said thoughtfully. He addressed Emma directly. Child, do you understand what this creature will become? In decades, she will be larger than your city buildings. She will have psychic power to level mountains. She will live for millennia. What makes you think you can maintain this bond? Emma looked up at Scorvath with those innocent human eyes. Because she's my friend. And friends don't leave each other just because one of them gets big or lives a long time. We'll figure it out together. And if she becomes dangerous? Scorvath pressed. If her instincts override this bond you claim? Then I'll remind her who she is, Emma said simply. She turned to Ember and held out her hand. The dragon lowered her head and nuzzled Emma's palm. She's not dangerous. She's just been treated like she was dangerous her whole life. Nobody ever gave her a chance to be anything else. Scorvath was 3,000 years old. He had seen empires rise and fall. He had witnessed countless species and their various philosophies. But this simple human child had just articulated something that shook the foundations of his understanding. What if Drakmorians were violent and isolated, not because it was their nature, but because it was all anyone expected of them? What if, given different treatment, they could be something else? "I wish to attempt something unprecedented," Scorvath announced. "With your permission, Ambassador, I would like to establish psychic contact with your species." Ambassador Okonkwo tensed. That's never been done safely before. It has never been attempted correctly before, Scorvath corrected. But perhaps with this hatchling and child as a bridge we can manage what was previously impossible. Emma looked up at the massive elder. "You want to be friends too?" Scorvath's expression, insofar as his reptilian features could express such things, might have been a smile. "Yes, small human. I suppose that is what I want." The demonstration was arranged for the full Galactic Council. Representatives from every member species gathered once again, their holographic forms filling the virtual chamber. This time, though, they weren't debating what to do about the problem. They were witnessing something that had never been done before. Scorvath stood in the center of the research station's largest cargo bay. His massive form was intimidating even to those watching through screens from halfway across the galaxy. Beside him stood Emma, looking impossibly small next to the ancient dragon. And between them sat Ember, now nearly the size of a small spacecraft, her scales gleaming under the bright lights. "The experiment is simple," Dr. Velnax explained to the assembled council. "Elder Scorvath will attempt to establish a psychic connection with the council representatives through the bond between Emma and Ember. If successful, it will be the first peaceful psychic contact between Drakmorians and the wider galactic community. And if it fails?" High Counselor Threx asked, his skepticism evident. "Then we will know that this approach has limits," Ambassador Okonkwo said calmly. "But I believe it will succeed." Scorvath looked down at Emma. "Are you ready, small human?" Emma nodded. She held Ember's claw with one hand and extended her other hand upward toward Scorvath. The elder dragon lowered his massive head, and Emma placed her small hand on his scaled snout. The connection formed instantly. Emma felt Scorvath's mind touch hers. It was vast and ancient, filled with memories of worlds and wars she couldn't begin to comprehend. But filtered through her bond with Ember, those overwhelming experiences became manageable. She felt Scorvath's curiosity, his caution, and underneath it all, something she hadn't expected: loneliness. Through Emma and Ember's bond, Scorvath extended his consciousness outward to the council members who had agreed to participate. The connection was gentle, nothing like the psychic assaults Drakmorians usually employed. It was more like opening a door and inviting someone inside rather than breaking down their walls. One by one, council members felt the touch of Scorvath's mind. And through that connection they felt something profound. They experienced millennia of isolation. They felt what it was like to be feared by every species you encountered, to have all attempts at communication met with terror and violence. They understood how Drakmorians had become what they were not through choice, but through the expectations placed upon them. And then they felt what Ember experienced every day: joy at seeing Emma, contentment when being petted, excitement during their games, love given and received freely without fear or domination. Counselor Xyloth of the Krell Collective was the first to speak after the connection ended. His voice was thick with emotion. "I understand now. The Drakmorians have been trapped in a cycle of their own making, reinforced by our fear. They became the monsters we expected because no one offered them another option." Matriarch Vess of the Vrelnathi Hive was silent for a long moment. Her species operated on pure logic, and what she had experienced challenged that logic. Finally, she spoke. "The human approach appears effective. Treating the hatchling with affection rather than fear has produced measurably different behavioral outcomes. Logic suggests we should study this further rather than terminate it." Even High Counselor Threx seemed affected. "I have fought Drakmorians in 3 different conflicts. I have seen the destruction they cause. But what I felt through that connection, they were not evil. They were lonely, and they responded to our fear with the only behavior we seemed to expect from them: Ambassador Okonkwo allowed herself a small smile. Does the council wish to revise its position on Emma and Ember? The vote was swift and nearly unanimous. Not only would Emma and Ember be allowed to continue their bond, but the council formally requested that they serve as ambassadors. They would be the bridge between humanity, the Drakmorian Empire, and the wider galaxy. Scorvath addressed the council directly. My people have been isolated for too long. We will begin opening diplomatic channels with your governments. We have much to learn from humanity's approach to what you call domestication. Perhaps it is time we Drakmorians learned what it means to have friends rather than subjects. Over the following months, everything changed. The research station became a center for what humanity called the Friendship Initiative. Scientists from across the galaxy came to study the bond between Emma and Ember, trying to understand the principles that made it work. Human psychologists and animal behaviorists were suddenly in high demand, their expertise applicable to species that other races had given up on as too dangerous or aggressive. Ember continued to grow, but her temperament remained gentle and controlled. She learned to manipulate objects with her claws, to communicate through a combination of sounds and psychic impressions, and to navigate social situations that would have been impossible for other Drakmorians. Emma, for her part, became something of a celebrity. At 8 years old, she was the youngest ambassador in galactic history. She handled it with the same straightforward honesty that had started everything. I don't understand why everyone makes it so complicated, she told a reporter from the Galactic News Network. If you're nice to someone, they're usually nice back. It's not rocket science. The phrase, "it's not rocket science," quickly became popular across dozens of worlds, though most species had no idea what a rocket was. Scorvath remained on the station for several weeks, studying Emma and Ember's interactions. He was particularly fascinated by how Emma set boundaries. When Ember became too rough during play, Emma would say gentle firmly and Ember would immediately adjust her behavior. When Ember tried to take food from Emma's plate, Emma would tell her no, and Ember would back off without any sign of aggression. Discipline without dominance, Scorvath mused. Boundaries without violence. The human child corrects the hatchling's behavior while maintaining affection. It is a delicate balance we Drakmorians never learned. Maybe you could learn it now, Emma suggested. She was helping Ember practice flying in the station's cargo bay, throwing a ball high so Ember would swoop to catch it. It's never too late to make friends. Scorvath made that rumbling purr sound, the one Drakmorians apparently could make but rarely did. Perhaps you're right, small human. 5 years later, when Emma was 12 and Ember had grown to the size of a frigate, they took their first diplomatic mission together. They traveled to 17 different worlds, meeting with governments and demonstrating what was possible when species approached each other with openness rather than fear. Ember could now carry Emma on her back through space, protected by the same psychic field that shielded adult Drakmorians from the void. They would fly between worlds and Emma would read books or do homework while riding on her best friend's back, surrounded by stars. The research station had expanded dramatically. What had started as one girl and one dragon had grown into a full program. Humans were now working with species that the galaxy had written off as too dangerous. A Thaxian battle beast that had been scheduled for termination was now living peacefully with a human family who taught it to play soccer. A Vrelnathi war drone that had malfunctioned and started attacking. Its hive was rehabilitated by a human engineer who treated it like a scared child rather than a broken machine. The galaxy was slowly learning what humanity had known for millennia. Sometimes the scariest creatures just need someone to see past their teeth and claws to the being underneath. Emma's father watched his daughter prepare for another diplomatic flight. She was taller now, growing into the teenager she would soon become, but she still approached life with that same simple kindness that had changed everything. Are you ready for the summit on Krell Prime? He asked. Emma checked her supply pack and nodded. Amber's excited. She's never been to a water world before. You know this is important, right? You're not just playing with your friend anymore. You're representing humanity to the entire galaxy. Emma smiled and hugged her father. Dad, I'm always just playing with my friend. That's the whole point. Everyone else makes it complicated, but it's really simple. Just be kind and see what happens. She climbed onto Ember's back, settling into the familiar space between the dragon's wings. Ember stretched, her scales catching the light in beautiful patterns. Through their bond, Emma felt Ember's joy at another adventure together. As they launched from the station, Emma looked back at the place that had become home. She thought about that day 5 years ago when she had first seen a small, scared hatchling behind glass. Everyone had told her it was a monster. She had decided to call it cute instead. Sometimes, Emma reflected, the most powerful thing you could do was simply be kind when everyone else chose fear. A transmission came through on her communicator. It was from a distant sector, a place where another impossible species had been discovered. The message was simple. We found something everyone is scared of. Do you have time to come make another friend? Emma grinned and scratched behind Ember's horns. The dragon rumbled with anticipation. What do you think, girl? Ready for another adventure? Ember's response was a joyful roar that echoed through the vacuum of space, carried on psychic waves that every nearby ship could feel. It wasn't a sound of aggression or dominance. It was pure excitement.